Hi again with another episode, which I should name as Epistemic Violence or Epistemic Injustice in Pakistan. I think I've talked about it before, but I wanted to talk more from a very specific point of view. Um, excuse me, particularly. Regarding the recent ban on Rafiullah Kakar's appearance in TV shows or talk shows in the country. Um, this is not something new. Of course, we have known this all along, not just in Rafi's case, but also in the case of so many people in the country. And I would say, particularly for voices from the periphery, um, and Balochistan, particularly the tribal areas, and so on. And we know that it's a country where so many voices from so many different places, including Punjab and in Karachi and Sindh, are silenced when those voices go against the main narrative of the state. But I think, as I said in one of my previous videos on oppression and repression, I think it is still different when one of the few voices active on issues of critical importance inside Balochistan and on the national level is silenced in such a manner. It requires, I think, a special attention, particularly because Rafiullah Kakar is one of those individuals, one of those, I would say, public intellectuals who um, have presented the case of Balochistan and the oppressed people, including the Pashtuns. He appeared on PTM issues several times, or more than several times. Um, and it's not just about the counts, of course, or the count, but it's his um, the way in which in the way in which he uh, articulates his articulation, I should say, of these issues. Right. Rafi is a friend of mine. We went to college in Lahore together. We studied political science, and he comes from Kila Abdullah, which is one of the poorest districts of Balochistan. And he comes from a family which is also, where nobody went to college even. Rafi's journey, intellectual journey from this tiny village in Kila Abdullah to Oxford and then to Cambridge is phenomenal, right? And I have been a witness to his intellectual journey and his growth and his development, personal development, and then what he has given back to the country in terms of working with the government, with the state, on policy related issues such as the national planning commission, and in Balochistan on multiple um, projects and jobs, and of which I'm not in entirety aware of, but or I know the details of all those jobs. But my main point is that Rafi has engaged with the state on these matters, right? Policy and development and peace and so on. And Rafi has also been unjustly criticized by even Pashtuns at times as someone who is seen with suspicion as pro-state, who is not, who doesn't come at these ethnic issues as very clear, or as clear as in he doesn't take the side of the the politics of for example, Pashtun nationalists. I've been, you know, again on this journey with him and seeing him being criticized by people from PK Map, by others who have seen him as, in the words of some, as a careerist, as someone who is interested in his building his career and so on, right? Now, these are all, I think, unjust and misplaced criticisms of the man, because, I mean, we all, need jobs, and we all need um, work, and to live. And it really is, I think, unwise, and I think even unethical to judge someone in a way that doesn't really take into account the difficulties of political life, right, and family life, and so on. And I think politics or resistance to authoritarian regimes and setups is very much voluntary. For example, in the Nazi Germany in the late 1930s, there were intellectuals and philosophers who were very active um, in France, for instance, when uh, Germany was occupying France, and it was a climate where it was very difficult for philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and many others who to continue the work that they did. But some argued that it's hard to judge intellectuals and philosophers uh, in these moments as to what they are saying and what they're not saying. Now, of course, I mean, this is open, I think, also to debate and maybe even criticism. But I think what I am highlighting is the complexity of life, of having to live, but also having to resist in such climates, authoritarian, oppressive climates. But I wouldn't want to go into detail in that. But I merely wanted to highlight the fact that Rafi is someone, or the state has silenced someone who has worked and engaged with the state on policy, on other issues, uh, you know, but the state somehow doesn't see his views on certain issues as acceptable, and hence it is silenced. And the mere fact that I highlighted Rafi's criticism by others, including Pashtuns, as someone who doesn't really take a clear position or take the side of his own kith and kin. Um, uh, you know, that's the man, right? The man who is not acceptable to circles in his own ethnic kin and kith and kin, and precisely because they think he is pro-state, or he is engaged with the state, or his views are not really fair, and so on. But the state is not accepting even such a person, right? And that is, I think, really, this. Um, how should I put this? Um, contradiction, maybe not even a contradiction, but the fact that he is really someone who has maintained his position on things the way he sees them, which means he isn't really, just because he has worked with the state or engaged the state doesn't mean he has changed his views. He has not, right? Which is why the state is silencing him. And but the I think the main idea, or rather the issue or the concern, the serious concern here is that if people like Rafi, and I'm not by any means saying Rafi is not critical of the state, which is why he is being silenced, but he's also open to dialogue and so on, and work through and from within the states, in from within the state, in ways where it is acceptable. Now, again, I haven't had conversation with Rafi. This is my own views on how I see him as someone who is really. I mean, this is quite a normal thing to do, but even that is not acceptable to this state, right? And that just shows the level of oppression. It shows the level of silencing. It shows how unready the state of Pakistan is to engage in any serious political dialogue when it comes to the issues of the periphery. It has proscribed PTM as a an illegal organization. It has proscribed BYC, the Baloch Exjati Committee, as an illegal organization, and it is silencing very rational, very um, reasonable voices such as Rafiullah Kakar, and from engagement with these kinds of issues. And and then what happens is that when the state um, silences or closes doors to negotiation and dialogue and a debate, then what you end up seeing is what the BLA does. I mean, I'm not saying Pashtuns or Rafi will necessarily, of course not, but I'm highlighting a major um, dynamic of conflict and peace. Uh, so when both civil and institutional avenues are closed off for debate and conflict resolution, then of course insurgency, not doesn't only take root, but it gives a lot of legitimacy and a lot of support to violence by what BLA did, which is very unfortunate, and of course it's non-ideal. But that's what happens. Epistemic violence and injustice ultimately leads to you know those kinds of strategies. But to come back to Rafiullah Kakar, one more point. I had some notes taken before I came on this video to talk about it. Um, yeah, Rafi and myself included, and many other Pashtuns and Baloch, um, who are able to articulate their views on these kinds of issues, have had a long journey from tiny villages where they didn't see books in libraries for years, and then it took them almost forever to come to a point where they could say and write and speak back to the state. But that is being taken away. That power is being silenced. That power is being taken away from people like Rafi, right? Um, and and what happens as a result is that it alienates such humans and such voices and intellectuals from the state itself, right? And it doesn't solve the pending issues, right? Political issues, economic issues in the country, right? It only exacerbates these issues, right? And and that's not good for the state, at least in my view. I mean, it's not good for the people who are being silenced, uh, the Baloch and Pashtuns and others, but it's also not good, most probably in the long run, for the state. And I think, um, if anything, letting these kinds of ideas um, out in the open for debate uh, creates space for, I think, thinking, for sitting through these very difficult issues, and hopefully ultimately coming to terms with some sort of political resolution. But if these are silenced and they are oppressed, then it doesn't, these issues just don't, not only go away, they don't disappear, but they start to develop in, uh, you know, clandestine enclaves, or in, they take the form of, um, forgot the name of a scholar who termed it as hidden transcripts. These will take the form of hidden transcript. Now, I'm not saying Rafi will be silent. Rafi is there, out there. He talks about these issues on, for example, one of the popular podcasts, The Pakistan Experience. And there are so many other avenues, such as this one, right? I'm talking on YouTube. Um, these voices and these ideas cannot be silenced. They will continue to be raised through other means and through other platforms. And you know, if history is any guide, nations have reached peaceful conclusions to conflicts through dialogue. I mean, it's very rare that violence, is brings about a solution. Although nations have engaged in violence also. I mean, the Algerians engaged in violence. East Timorese engaged in violence, and they got their own state, although there were shifts from violence to non-violence and so on. But it's better for change to happen through political democratic means, and that requires space for dialogue, that requires the unsilencing of individuals who are reasonable, acceptable, who should be acceptable to the state. But if such individuals, as I highlighted in the beginning, Rafi is not acceptable. I mean, forget about BLA, forget about anyone else, forget about Manzoor, forget about other Ali, and forget about mm, Baloch women, Marang, and so on. Um, but this is just telling of how in deep crisis the state itself is in terms of its incapacity and its inability to come to terms with the resolution of these long-standing conflicts, such as the Baloch issue and Balochistan particularly. Um, and yeah, just a few thoughts I thought I should share. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again. Bye.